In a village where humans and dragons coexist harmoniously, the protagonist's life is turned upside down by the younger brother's adventure. When a dragon is severely injured in the brother's reckless act, the protagonist must face not only the father's disappointment and anger, but also take on the task of healing the dragon. In this crisis, how will she prove her worth and maintain the deep connection between the family and the dragon? Join us to tame the wildest dragons. Let's get those subscriptions rolling. Chapter 1. And while monsters roamed freely, they didn't care if you had 4 legs or 2, if you bore fur or hide, if you flesh, you were oppressed. Humans grew up with 2 rules. Stay within your city walls, never go out at night. Well, most humans. I came from a small village hidden within the Randala Valley with no walls to protect us. We don't need walls to protect us. You see, while all the boys and girls grew up in the plains in the east, learning to ride horses and farm their crops, I grew up learning how to ride and tame dragons. My village, Plum, is the home to the only settlement of humans who have learned to not only survive living in the dragon territory, but thrive and live with them in harmony. We have been taming dragons for so long, my last name, Drusino, meant dragon tamer or languid. Our dragons protected us against harpies and manticore, in return we mined an ore from the mountains called Dragon Vein. It was a beautiful stone, blood red with speckles of gold and silver trickling through every core. It sold for a very high price in the eastern markets, since it was only found in our mountains, but dragons sought it out for purely dietary reasons. They needed dragon vein to breathe fire. Within minutes of ingesting the stone, their body breaks it down, melts it in their core, and when they exhale, a brilliant red flame spews free of their jowls. Their fire was so hot, Alistair melted an alcove in the side of a mountain with her breath. We now use that alcove as a spot to sit and relax after a full day of training, or to hide from my family. Like right now, I huddled up against her body to keep the mountains chill off my back and to help me find the nerve to return home. Alistair nuzzled her snout against my side, a rumble vibrating in her chest. Her golden eyes slid over to me, then over the edge of the alcove down to the bottom of the valley where Plum sat. I brushed my fingers over her rough scales between her nostrils. The warmth of her breath alone pushed the cold away. I guess we should head back, I agreed with her, reluctantly. The sun was on its way down, and as safe as I felt, with Elzar, it'd be safer for both of us if I was home and she was with her colony before dark. Not because it was raining and the streets were muddied and gross. Talad, my youngest older brother, had done the stupidest thing on the planet and took a dragon for a joyride through Thorns Forest. They got tangled up in the thorns. The forest was aptly named after, and my brothers had to go in and rescue them. My brothers returned unscathed, but the dragon Talon had taken was seriously injured, to the point we might have to put him down if our healers couldn't do anything for him. So what was I hiding from Dad's temper? He had been livid upon Talon's arrival, and even more so once we heard how serious Reuben's condition was. It was for the best to wait it out, let him simmer down on his own time. Sighing, knowing I couldn't hide forever, I stretched my arms over my head and climbed to my feet. The great dragon beside me stretched her wings overhead, shaking her body head to tail. The rain slipped down her back and splashed me, giving her a droll look, knowing she could have prevented getting me wet. I pushed into her leg. I know I'm gonna get wet anyway, but that was cruel. Elizur raised her chin haughtily and snapped her eyes forward as sassily as a dragon could get. Whatever, you crazy lizard. For my remark, she tipped a wing outside and angled it in such a way that allowed the water to trickle from the tip down onto my head. I squealed and slapped her wing away. Cut it. I'm sorry. She stopped immediately after my apology, then lowered down onto her knees so I could hop into the saddle, sitting between her wings. I hunkered down, holding the handles tight. Let's go. With a simple push from her legs, she leapt off the edge and spread her wings wide to catch the current. The glide down to the village was short, but I still kept my hood pulled tightly against my head, preferring to arrive home as dry as possible. Like that would ever happen in this valley. When it rained here, it poured. It was like the gods swallowed up an entire ocean in the clouds, then dropped it on us. And even then, around this time of year, mist was always in the air, clinging and drenching my clothes. Alisar landed just behind my two-story house. Most of the houses in Plum were scattered, allowing plenty of space for our dragons to come and go as they pleased. They weren't allowed near the center of town where the shops and businesses were huddled closer together, though sometimes they were cheeky and tried to squeeze into our street. Slipping off her back, I remembered to give her an appreciative pat on her neck. Have a good night. Elisar, I'll see you tomorrow for training a dragonling. She nodded, then pressed her muzzle into my chest, puffing a blast of hot air, which instantly warmed me to my bone. She pulled away and took to the sky for her nest in the mountains. I stared at the large wooden door held up by iron hinges. When I was younger, it used to be too heavy for me to open Casper. My oldest big brother would always have to open it for me. Now, after riding and taming dragons for so long, I was stronger than the average woman in her early 20s. Accepting the inevitable, I yanked the door open, the warmth from the fireplace billowing around me like a blanket. I quickly shut the door to keep the heat in and tiptoed into the kitchen, hearing voices. The stone hearth was especially pleasant to stand beside, the scent of stew wiggling its way to my nose. Kaden, the second oldest, was the best cook. Apparently, using a few tips and tricks Mom had passed down to him, only his cooking could smell this good and make my stomach growl louder than a dragon. That's not fair. Talon roared from the living room. Caught off guard by his sudden anger, I stumbled on the stone floor and nearly tripped on the wooden island standing in the middle of the kitchen. I'm your last son, he went on in his outrage. It's only right. I teach the last Acker Prince. Maybe you should have thought about that before you nearly got yourself killed. We had to put down poor Ribbon for your mistake. He hadn't cooled off as much as I thought he would have. The only time I'd heard him this mad was when dragon scavengers had the nerve to enter our valley and hunt our dragon. He killed more than a handful of them before giving them the option to surrender. Fortunately for Talon, Dad would never raise a fist to it. Unfortunately, that meant he had to find some other form of punishment, and it sounded like he'd found one that hit low below the belt. Prince Camden had recently celebrated his 21st birthday, which meant he was now old enough to begin his rite of passage to become a dragon prince. Our family was chosen to guide the Acker princes once they became of age, because we were the best dragon tamers in the valley. And we had been for generations. For Dad to take that honor away from Talon, it was cruel. He would be humiliated in front of the entire village, swallowing a load of courage. I inched towards the living room. All my brothers were here. Casper and Codden were flanking Talon, who was sitting furiously in the pelted armchair. Harry and Giles were lounging on the couch. The former's legs swung onto the footstool, while the latter hung his legs over the side. Dad stood in front of the roaring fireplace, appearing to be only a dark shadow looming over my youngest older brother, with the way the lighting played behind him. Dad's eyes flashed to mine, the rage in them quelling for the moment. Carter, where have you been? I sent Codden to find you hours ago. He gave said brother a cutting look for obviously failing his task. The gods are pissing on us today. You must be cold. As if that was all that needed to be said. Casper left his post at Talon's side, swept a pelt blanket off the couch my other brothers were sitting on, and swung it over my shoulder. He gave me a warm smile before chucking my chin. I smiled at that head. Like everyone in my family, he towered over me by easily a foot and had the same broad, bulky muscles as my father. He got the dark brown hair from Dad, but the light blue eyes we all carried were from Mom. He'd started growing a scruffy beard, and while I thought he looked like a bear emerging from his cave after months of hibernation, a lot of the women in the village had stopped teasing him for being baby-faced and started flirting shamelessly with him in the streets. With his arm around me, Casper guided me into the nook between Harry and Giles, who both welcomed me with sympathetic smiles at my drenched state. Harry draped his heavy arm over my shoulders, keeping me nice and warm, while Giles dropped his head in my lap, continuing to swing his feet off the arm of the couch. Now, Dad was saying getting back to being angry again now that I was nice and cozy between my bulky brothers, since the entire family is here. I can officially say Taslan will not be guiding Prince Camden through his rite of passage. Dad, you can't do that, Talon shouted, jumping to his feet. Casper and Kaden grabbed his shoulders and yanked him back into the chair. You've already told them I'd do it. I'm picking him up next week. Harry bit his lip, tapping his fingers on his knee. I bumped him to encourage him to say whatever he was holding back. It was better to just spit it out in these family meetings rather than letting it fester once decisions had been made. Otherwise, it ended with someone fighting someone in the backyard, and I would have to drag both of their sorry asses to our healers because I sure in hell wasn't stitching them up. I grew up with them. I fought with them. I knew Zip and healing them. Dad, Harry piped up after letting him tell Talon what idiot he was a little longer. He cleared his throat nervously once he got his attention. I agree. He has to be punished. But he does have a point. Prince Camden is arriving in a week. Talon, as we all have, has had years of preparation to train him. There isn't enough time to find another trainer, especially one as qualified. We Drusino are the best at what we do. The Akers won't accept anyone else. They might even take offense. He added the last part sheepishly. He'd sounded so confident up until that point, and I was proud of him. Not only was it scary as hell opposing Dad when he was like this wild and irrational, really, but he didn't talk as much as my other brothers, always worrying about what they might think of him. Even though being the middle child was the safest position to be in this family, no one particularly looked up to him. No one looked down on him. And no one babied him. Drusino will still train the prince, Dad assured us, a smile tugging at his lips. It looked more menacing than endearing, considering the rest of his face was very much still etched with rage. You mean one of us gets to train a second prince? Giles asked excitedly. Guiding a prince through his rite of passage was one of the most rewarding experiences there was. These princes were the kingdom's protectors, and it was all because of us. Without our guidance, they wouldn't be able to find their dragon partner, wouldn't be able to wield the magic they needed to protect our kingdom from monsters. Without a doubt, it would be Casper. He trained the Dragon King's eldest son when he came of age 7 years ago. He was a little rusty teaching, but he'd learned so much more. Since then, he'd be the best one for the job. No, Dad said you've all gone through the rite of passage and have done a fine job helping the princes find their bonded partner. But now it's time for the youngest member of our family to make a name for herself. Cal will teach him. The room was silent. Not even the wind dared to howl through the windows. The fire shrank back into the pit, a voiceless flame flickering among the kindling. I opened my mouth to ask him what the hell he was thinking, giving me a job I was never trained for. But Talon was on his feet in a flash, shouting. And again, Casper and Codden forced him back in his seat back off. He growled at them, swatting their hands aside before turning a deathly glare on Dad. You can't be serious. It's bad enough you're taking this away from me now. You're giving it to Colline. Codden snickered into his hand. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Why? I asked nervously. You don't think I can do it? I'd seen them train Prince Camden's brothers. They did some hardcore stuff without going near befriending a dragon. There was more to learning about dragons than how to bond with one. They had to know how to fly on one, how to fight with one, use dragon vein to create fire. I knew how to fight, but I didn't know how to teach someone. Codden shook his head at me, brown hair flying wildly over his eye. If he doesn't chew you up and spit you out, you can teach him anything. Yeah, so Giles agreed, the last one to see the princes 3 years ago. Prince Camden is kind of a hard ass. He's not gonna like a woman teaching him. He pulled his legs front-facing and leaned his elbows on his knees, suddenly more interested in this conversation. Hulo Kim, Casper ridiculed who hadn't been to the Acker Castle since he trained Prince Li 7 years ago. Kali will be fine. Giles scowled at him. Last time you saw him, his balls hadn't dropped and he came up to your elbow. The man's 21 now. He's very different. Casper held on to his childish, reminiscent grin. We'll see about that. Teach him real good Kalai, who wants to place bet. Cotton offered, rubbing his hands together excitedly. Kalai's gonna come running to Dad to ask for one of us to take over within the first week.
I give her 3 days, Giles bet, tossing 2 gold pieces to Cotton before he makes her cry.
The faith my brothers had in me was astonishing. Harry tested them, giving Cotton 2 coins. Kyle's gonna put him in his place, day 1. He winked at me, making me want to rescind my previous thought. Nah, Casper put in, adding to the coins, Cully Condon will get along swimmingly. Perhaps more than they'll like. He gave him a wary glance before he exploded into laughter by Dad's horrified expression. Talon groaned loudly, like he used to do when he was 5 and wanted attention.
This is my mission.
It's not fair. Dad's expression wiped clean, and the room silenced again, the air being sucked out of our lungs. Even the fire died down again. It wasn't fair that Reuben died either. He trusted you with his life and you led him to his death. Next time, think about your actions before you put someone else's life in danger. He nodded to me. Kalai will fly to the Ecker Castle at the beginning of next week. Boys, you will give her what tips you can in the meantime. He came over to me and squeezed my shoulders, make us proud. College no pressure then. Chapter 2. All week, my brothers pulled me aside one by one to give me their sage advice. Casper woke me up before the dragons and took me up the Mount Caspian Trail, the very mountain he was named after. I grumbled at both the obscene hour the sun was barely peeking through the valley, and for the hike itself, if I wanted to go anywhere outside the village, Alisor gave me a ride. Where was she today? Sleeping like a normal, darnel creature. Casper laughed on our way up the heavily trodden path. It was one of the trickier trails, winding left to right, seemingly endlessly up the mountain. The stones were loose after the heavy rainfall yesterday. I focused more on keeping my hands cozy in my fluffy sheep coat and enjoying seeing some colorful patches of grass along the otherwise rocky path to stay awake rather than how much I preferred to fly to the top. He said it was character building. Well, by the time we got to the top, consider my character built and sweaty. It was a clear, sunny day today, so there was no mist to block the village huddled between mountains down below. The Wayland River trickled down the middle, splitting the village in half, though no buildings were near the river's edge. It was shallow around this time of year, but give it 4 more months and it would be easily twice as wide and wild. Sighing in relief, I plopped down on a large boulder other people had also clearly used as a seat, with remnants of cloth piled up at my feet, of which I dumped because they were gross and soggy from the rain the other night. Casper stretched his arms over his head lazily like a big jungle cat. He'd shucked out of his jacket like I had and was glistening with sweat. I'm sure a lot of ladies would kill to get the view I had right now. But instead of looking at my brother, I turned my attention to the rest of the valley. Mount Caspian was by far not the tallest mount. We couldn't see what was on the other side of the valley. At the highest point, which we stood, Mount Anchor was the best one to hike, more like climber. If you wanted to see the rolling plains of Walla in the east, the valley itself was laned with colorful bushes, some of which might dare to be called trees. They were so tall and clumpy grass sprinkled with all kinds of wildflowers. When I was younger, I used to run through the wildflower fields, hopping over the small creek that branched from the Wayland River. These days, I didn't visit the fields, often opting to play with the dragons in the more rocky parts of the valley, so their claws and rough play wouldn't tear up the beautiful flower. Just on the other side of this mountain, nestled between 2 others, lay the dragon's den, where a tamed dragon colony nested. We were too high up for me to see any of them, but I could hear the younger ones banging and hissing, trying out the various noises they could make. Casper, I like to exercise as much as the next girl, but what are we doing up here? He grinned broadly, slapping my back. They asked us to advise you on your rite of passage with Prince Camden. I'm sure you'll hear all about how our brothers did it, so I brought you here to talk about something else. He took on a more serious poise, crossing his arms and giving me that I am your big brother, so you listen to me look. That only he could pull off. The others tried it, but Casper had the most practice in it. Only Kaden came close to achieving the gravity of his words with his eye. This is your first time leaving the valley by yourself. First time going to the capital. Don't give me that look. I'm not giving you directions. I know you know how to get there. You'll be staying at the castle for the night, and we'll have dinner with the Acker family. No, you know, lady of the court. They know that, but
They are the royal family.
you'll have to show some decorum, and I feel like we failed you there. See, he bit his lip and sat down beside me. Without Mom, you haven't had a woman's influence, someone to teach you to be more womanly. I finished for him because he knew my family knew better than to bring up my lack of ladylike quality. The village respected my family for our skills as dragon tamers, but there was a reason my best friend was a dragon. The other girls my age, and I didn't see eye to eye, never have. While they helped breed and care for dragons, I tamed them and played in the mud with them. I sighed heavily, dumping my chin on a propped up hand. I'm gonna have to wear a dress, aren't I? My aunts told me all about the beautiful, extravagant gowns that came with the court life and how they wished their husbands were lords instead of dragon farmers. They told me to find a wealthy man who would shower me with fine fabrics and jewelry. Needless to say, I tried not to spend much time with my aunts. Casper chuckled, slapping my back. Wearing a skirt isn't as bad as you think it is. Who knows? Maybe you'll like it. He couldn't even say it with a straight face and let out a deep-bellied laugh. Who am I kidding? He took a deep breath, quelling his mirth long enough to continue on a more serious note. You have to be at least a little formal, Kale, and use your manners. Use sires and because your majesties and whatnot. Do you remember about place setting?
Good. I don't want to go over that. I think that's so boring.
He went on some more on the does and don'ts in the Acker castle. When he noticed it was getting overwhelming for me, he reminded me that the Acker family were kind people, and that if anyone in the castle treated me any differently, to tell Prince Elliot, because apparently they had some big brother code to look after each other's sibling. He continued to brag about how easy training Prince Elliot went and that he was a natural dragon prince, so I shouldn't get my hopes too high with my prince's progress. To be fair, Prince Eli found his bonded within 2 weeks, a record in the family Casper had every right to brag about. No one in the history of our families had found a dragon partner so quickly. After our talk, we headed home and helped Kaden prepare dinner. The next day, Kaden had taken it upon himself to show me how he helped Prince Liam find a partner. I followed him along the long weaving trail leading to the dragon nest. Thankfully, we didn't set off as early as I'd gone with Casper yesterday, but it took us just as long as it did to hike the mountain to find the nest. The path broke off once the incline got too steep, and we had to climb over a rocky ridge the dragons had built to ward off predators from entering the narrow canyon. Once we reached the top of the ridge, I slid down to the base. The ground leveled out in between the mountains, rocky nests scattered throughout the canyon. It wasn't breeding season, so there were no eggs in the nests, but that didn't stop the female dragons from curling up into tight, scaly balls within their nest. The males preferred to perch on the cliff sides and watch over their females from above. There were only a few dragons in here for now. Later, they would return from the skies or training when the sun started to set.
At our entrance, the dragons perked up. 2 came over to us and nuzzled our chests in greeting.
I rubbed a female's nose and pressed my forehead between her nostrils. She began to purr, a songful hum vibrating through her body. Dragons were very social creatures, and they mostly bonded through touch. I was the only one in my village who knew the exact locations where dragons like to be touched, and how after years of observing them and joining them and in the wild. My brothers didn't see the need to use body language to tame dragons. They had their tools, and that was all that was needed.
That was why I was the better tamer, in my opinion.
The female pulled away, puffing smoke over my head. I used to think it was a sign of aggression, but I've seen females puff smoke around their young.
Maybe it was to spread their scent. I hadn't figured that out yet.
I blew at her face, doing my best to mimic her.
Her eyes flashed amber like a fire, then she turned back to her nest, purring away like a kitten. Cowden shook his head at me. You're ridiculous. They love it. What do you want to show me if you were not here to socialize with the dragon? I brought Prince Liam here to find his dragon, he said, gesturing widely to the nests and sleeping dragons. We spent hours sitting with one dragon, then the next, until he felt a connection with one. I had to help him get comfortable being so close to a creature so large first, and then we had to figure out which dragon he felt the strongest connection with. I tell you, being one who will never be bound to a dragon, it's hard to describe what being bonded feels like. We thought he was bonded at least 30 times before we found Balthazar. It was actually quite funny. I hope you have as much fun. How does the prince know he's been chosen? Despite how my brothers talked, the dragon chose their bonded, not the other way around. What does a dragon look for? It depends on the dragon, he replied simply, walking deeper into the canyon. I hurried to keep up with his long gait. Some prefer an honest man, others a kind man. A few even like a brutal warrior. Whatever the dragon deems good quality. A bonded pair generally have similar traits, like Prince Liam and his dragon Balthazar. Liam is all rugged and stoic, and Balthazar is a strong believer that a male should be able to do things on his own, or he isn't worthy of being a male. Cadden brushed the hair out of his face with an eye roll. I like the guy and respect him, but he sure is all about that alone and brooding life. The ladies love it? I asked, truly befuddled, why a woman would be into a man who thought he had to do everything. He shrugged. I'm not a woman. How should I know? It also helps being a prince and good looking. I only have one of those things going for me, Tish.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah.
Forgot your crown at home. It would have looked so shiny in the sun today. He shoved me toward a pile of dung. In the nick of time, I caught my footing and twisted away, stumbling into an empty nest. Laughing, he pulled me upright, then slapped my back. Smooth move. I was so sure you were going into that dung heap, and I would have been more than happy to give my sweet big brother the hug he's always desired, because no other woman will touch him. He gave me a challenging sidelong look.
Oh, yeah? You want to go there? At least I'm not a virgin.
My face flushed so quickly, I grew dizzy. I shoved him. Oh, like any of you would approve of any man I brought home. There was also the small matter of the man in plum being absolutely terrified of my family. My brothers and father were giants, tamed the fiercest of dragons, and could fend off a herd of centaurs with their bare hands if they really wanted to.
There was no man brave enough to face that.
I accepted that 5 years ago when I attempted to go out with the butcher's son. As soon as Dad found out we kissed, Charlie decided to call things off the next day, just out of fear of him knowing. If that was because of a kiss, the man who slept with me would die. And the whole village knew it. I'm gonna die a virgin. Cowden offered a sympathetic smile and ruffled the hair out of my ponytail. You know, Dad wouldn't actually kill a man if you chose to be with him, right? I threw a cutting look at him, soothing the wild mane he'd freed from my ponytail. I do, but no one else does. He stopped walking, giving me a chance to tie my hair back before I got frustrated. The dark brown curls were hard enough to brush. It took concentration to tame it.
You know, when you leave next week, you'll be unsupervised. Why not visit a village along the way?
Find a handsome lad and get it out of the way. I stared at him, surprised, a little insulted and dubious. You want me to bone a complete stranger? Dad taught us to be wary of who we trusted outside the valley. Crime was higher in other villages because the punishments weren't as strict as ours. A lot of ours resulted in banishment to the cult, dangerous mountain fire, or death by dragon. So we had to be more careful when we left the valley. And here my second oldest brother was telling me to get naked with some random guy who may rob me, hurt me, or just straight up kill me. No, thank you, he shrugged. It's just a thought. You don't have to, if you don't mind dying a virgin. Damn him, I sucker punched his gut. Groaning, he tipped over, leaning into me for support. I sometimes wish you were more like a girl so you wouldn't hit so hard. I shoved him away. Yeah, well, it's your fault. I was raised more like a mar. None of you thought I needed a female role model until it was too late. I peered up at the sun, seeing we only had a few hours of daylight left. I sighed. So are you going to stop being a pussy and tell me how my prince will know when he's bonded with a dragon? Or should we go home now? Cotton rubbed his stomach with a grimace as he straightened up. He'll not. It's something you don't know what it feels like until it happens. Remember, he's going to share a soul with a dragon. That kind of thing doesn't feel like an ordinary sensation he experiences every day, not for the first 21 years of his life. Anyway, he'll feel different. He'll sense his partner. Ask Harry how he helped Prince Alaric strengthen his bond. He found his dragon quickly, but even though he was 21, the age to undergo the rite of passage, he wasn't ready. He had a hard time adjusting to having a dragon in his head. He peered up at the sky and came to the same conclusion as I did. That's enough for now. It'll be dark soon. Let's head back. Just as Cotton suggested, I hunted Harry down the next day, finding him fishing on the bridge, connecting the two halves of Plum. It was conveniently just down the street from our house. If you asked any of our fellow villagers, they'd tell you this was a terrible fishing spot. It was loud, with the wagons and foot traffic. The river was shallow here, and it was the children's favorite spot to play. Well, when the children weren't playing in the river and it was too early for heavy traffic, Harry had great success fishing here. He'd only been dangling his legs off the arched stone bridge with a rod in his hands for an hour, and he already had 2 fish in a bucket behind him. The sun had only just started peering over Mount Carp, so the streets were quiet, save the soft ripple of the river dividing the village. A light mist lay over the road, swirling in the gentle breeze between buildings. 2 hours after sunrise around this time of year was my favorite time. Only a few were awake, getting ready for their day, and the dragon's yawns could be heard from my window if I listened hard enough. It was a peaceful time, one where I could wander the streets freely before I went over to the training arena on the other side of town to tame dragonlings, but not today or for the foreseeable future. I hope the dragonlings don't cause too much trouble for the other tamers while I'm gone. Brushing that thought aside, those troublesome dragonlings would be just fine spence. And Kaiden's Kirai hopped onto the wall of the stone bridge beside Harry and watched the fish swim downstream. They were a good size, the length of my forearm, but they weren't fully matured yet. When the spring came back around again, they would be huge. More often than not, because this spot was shallow, they pushed the weak ones onto the shore, making it easy pickings for us before the birds and harpies came in. Hey, Kalafli! Harry greeted quietly, eyes intent on the fish. Out of all of us, his eyes were the closest to green, depending on the lighting. They were the most beautiful and interesting. Mine was a lame steel blue, nothing fascinating about them. What can I do for you? You're supposed to help me figure out how I'm going to guide Prince Camden through his rite of passage. I know Dad had ordered them to do it earlier in the week, but I'd thought he would use that time to think on it. Apparently not. Oh, right, he shrugged with a rueful smile. I still studying the fish. I don't think you need our help. You're a smart girl, and you've been watching us with the Acker princes since you were 13. You know what to do. As much as his faith in me was refreshing, I didn't have the same confidence. Dad had taught them since they could walk what to expect and what the prince needed to know, while I was in the dragonling pen with Elessa rolling around in the mud. I only had a week to get an idea of what I was supposed to do, less than a week now, actually. Somehow I had to try to not make myself look like a clueless fool in front of the prince, who will probably spend the most time here out of his brothers, because I didn't know what I was doing. I sighed heavily, feeling the butterflies in my stomach again. They grew stronger with every passing day. Soon they were going to escape. A fishing rod dipped down. A fish had taken the bait. Harry yanked it up as hard as he could. The fish went flying out of the water over our heads and landed on the bridge. Harry swung his feet off the side and pounced the fish with an efficient whack. Of his stick, the fish still had joined its brethren in the bucket. Content, Harry joined me on the wall again, but instead of positioning his fishing rod, he crossed his lanky legs and faced me. Halai, I promise you'll be okay. I've seen how you are with the dragons. You are the best tamer in the family. If you can handle a dangerous creature 10 times your size, you can handle Prince Camden. Don't let Cotton's bet bother you. I'd actually forgotten my brothers had placed bets on how quickly the prince could make me cry. Is he that bad? Not really. No, not when you get to know him. He's just a little rough as all. He tapped my knee merrily. Nothing compared to Zeller before you tamed him. Zeller was the biggest male I'd ever tamed. It was during mating season, and we needed a strong male to mate with our females to keep the bloodline strong. We hadn't used him during previous mating seasons because he was so aggressive and wouldn't let anyone near him. But our dragonlings that year were born weak and often got sick and died. Our breeders knew he would strengthen the line. So it was up to us to tame him, so our breeders could get close. One by one, my brothers tried to calm him, but he wouldn't let them near him. It had gotten to the point where Dad was ready to put him down if he wasn't going to be a cooperative member of the colony. I asked him if I could give it a try before he made any decision. He said no, because he'd already hurt Casper and Giles. So what did rebellious 14-year-old me do?
I went out during the cover of night and used my unique methods to tame it.
When morning came around, I rode him back to my yard and presented him to my family. Dad's heart nearly failed at the sight. I guess if I could handle Zeller, Prince Camden couldn't be that bad. I'm not worried about a man, I told Harry in confidence. I'm worried I'm not going to live up to the family name. Prince Camden is counting on me to guide him. If he doesn't find a dragon partner, he'll be the first actor in history to be denied by a dragon. And it'll be my fault. I will have failed him, his family, and our family. I don't know how to talk him through the bond if a dragon chooses him or how to use dragon vein. He doesn't stand a chance. I dumped my head in my hand. Only with Harry would I show any sign of weakness. My other brothers would eat it up and make me pay for it for weeks. But Harry felt the pressure and butterflies as much as I did. He slid off the wall and came to my side, wrapping an arm around me. Little sister, one day you'll see in yourself what we see in you.
Yeah.
We're tough on you to help you grow stronger, but perhaps we are too tough. You are a female after all. He was trying to comfort me, and he genuinely thought our family had been too tough on me. But I was who I am, because they treated me like an equal. I was strong and brave and smart. They made me those things. I wouldn't be them if they were too tough. If I feared my brothers and dragons, I'd be living with my Aunt Patricia. I slapped his arm away and stood up, pretending there wasn't a good 6-inch height difference between us. You've never been too hard on me. I just don't know what I'm doing this time. Right, he agreed, winking with mischievous eyes. So stop doubting yourself and let me teach you something. Follow me. He picked up his fish bucket and headed back for the house. He gave the bucket to Colin to do something nice with the fish, then waved for me to keep following him. We walked along the cobblestone road through town. The morning mist had finally faded, allowing the sun to shine fully down on Plum. So the streets were lively with vendors and children running down the road. A couple of them bumped into us, then apologized profusely, mistaking Harry's tall frame for Talon's, who could be a right asshole even to children if people got in his way. Harry ruffled the boy's hair and told him to be more careful. The girl flushed when Harry smiled at her, then hurried after her brother.
We went to the edge of town for the wildflower field.
There wasn't too much color going on at this time of year, but there were a few blues and reds for the late blooming flowers. Woods Creek bubbled further ahead, hidden within the tall grass. Harry led me to the circle of logs in the middle of the field. They surrounded a large pit of stones where we held festival bonfires, burned the dead, or where individuals used it for a night away from the village. It was a circle that welcomed even every prince that had come through our street.
We would have a traditional feast here on the first night of Prince Camden's arrival to welcome him to our home and to initiate our rite of passage.
Acker and Drissino cut their palms, shook hands, and swore a blood oath to do everything in our power to ensure the prince is successful and that the prince will use the power we give him to protect the people of his country with his life. When I was younger, it scared me when Codden and Casper had cut their hands to swear such a daunting oath. Now I was scared that I would break the oath.
Sitting down, Harry patted my back to join him on a log.
Reluctantly, I sat beside him and stared at the empty fire pit.
When Prince Alaric bonded with Jezebel for the first time, Harry said quietly, he nearly had a complete meltdown.
He felt his mind connect with hers and suddenly shared everything with her.
It was very overwhelming, and he ran away. I turned my gaze to him, surprised.
Prince Alaric had only been here 4 years ago, but I didn't remember him running away or freaking out. He was actually quite a collected man, very smooth and quick on his feet. It was a strange notion that he would run away. What did you do?
I asked curiously. He laughed a short but amused sound.
I hunted the bastard down and dragged him here.
He'd upset Jezebel very much by running away from her.
Of course, being bonded to him, she understood and knew what was going on in his head.
He wasn't scared of her, per se, just the idea of her being in his head. He wasn't aware how connected they'd be. King Corona tries to prepare them for the bond the best he can, but there really is no way to describe it. And it's a little different for every pair. Harry patted the spot on the other side of him. I sat him here in this very spot and told Jezebel to sit over there. He pointed to the other side of the log circle. I made them talk it out without getting into each other's heads so they could be honest with each other and themselves. It took a lot of coaxing, but after a while, Alaric grew to like that she understood him. He didn't have to be collected all the time with her, like he felt like he had to with everyone else. He was only ever himself with me and her. I hope that's different now. He'll be happier if he's true to himself. He smiled at me. Don't lose hope if Prince Camden freaks too.
Okay, it's normal.
You have to keep a level head and put yourself in his shoes and don't be mad at him. Were you mad at him? Absolutely furious. I felt so insulted that he would run away from such a thing, something we all wish we could do. But it is overwhelming and terrifying to have someone you just met know everything about you.
Just be patient and everything will fall into place. Kade, those are my wise words. I would heed his words. Harry had helped me a lot today. I squeezed his arm in appreciation, feeling more confident in my ability. And
Thanks, Harry. Now, I think I can teach Prince Camden to ride and fight on a dragon, but how do I teach him to use his fire that I'm so clueless about? He smiled, then tapped my nose. I asked Giles about that.
I think out of all of us, he had the best method teaching Prince Quentin how to use his fire.
He picked it up faster than most princes. That part of the training is usually what takes the longest in the rite of passage. Come on, let's go find him. He stood up and offered me a gentlemanly hand to help me to my feet. We found Giles sparring in the backyards with Casper and Cotta. Casper got a good hit across Cotton's jaw, knocking him back onto his butt, while Giles tackled Casper from behind and straddled his stomach with a barrage of punches. Rolling his eyes, Harry whistled to get their attention. Time out for a second, guys.
Kala has some questions for Giles. Thank the gods.
Giles rolled away from Casper before he could retaliate for getting the upper hand on him. He slipped to my side, wiping the smear of mud off his cheek. What's up, Sid? How do I use Dragon Vein to use fire magic?
his eyes dazzled at the question.
If anyone in this village knew more about the powers of Dragon Vein, he would challenge them in a heartbeat.
No one knew more about it than the pyromaniac of the family.
Let's go find some. I'll teach you. Casper gave him a look of warning.
Don't go blowing holes in the mountains again, Giles.
You scared the dragons last time you did that. Giles waved him off, hooking his free arm over my shoulder.
Don't worry about it, bro. It's all for the sake of learning.
You understand, right?
Casper slid his look to me, make sure he doesn't cause too much trouble. I nodded, seconding the responsible approach.
I didn't want to have to spend the rest of my days soothing spooked dragons.
He'll be the last person in the world to cause trouble.
Giles groaned childishly and stomped his foot. You're no fun, Cologne. What happened to the girl who rode a dragon and bareback when she was 8, even though they forbade you from doing it?
I rolled my eyes, shoving him towards the stables where we stashed our Dragon Vein. She's still here, but she also has to train a prince. He stopped stropping around, but his smile was still a little childish. They grow up so fast. He wiped at his fake tears. Next thing you know, you'll be finding a man and having babes.
Casper's closer to having babes than I am, I retorted.
Half of the female population of Plum were lining up to marry him, but Casper only had eyes for Bianca, the flower shop girl.
If only he'd just ask her out.
Sure, she was intimidatingly beautiful, but I'd seen the way she looked at him. She didn't look at other guys like that. Giles nodded in agreement, having also seen this look.
You know, if he doesn't ask Bianca out, I will.
He said loud enough for our brother to hear.
Casper's cheeks flushed before we turned the corner.
I called into the sky before turning into the stables where the riding equipment and Dragon Vein was stashed.
By the time I came fumbling out of the stables with the cumbersome equipment, Eliser's shadow passed over the yard once before she landed smoothly in front of my brother.
She gave him a lofty nod as she fluttered her wings delicately above her head so she wouldn't blast us with a gust of wind.
Hey, girl, ready for a ride? At that she roared softly and danced on her claws. Grinning, I handed Giles the satchel of Dragon Vein, then proceeded to saddle Eliser.
Being a small dragon, she couldn't fly with 2 people for long, but she got us halfway up Mount Llama, a mountain a short fly away from Plum.
She followed us on foot around the steep rocky pass to the mine shaft.
We weren't mining today, thank the gods for that, but the mines were the safest place to practice using Dragon Vein, since it was so far away from the village.
Most of the miners came there via dragon. Otherwise, it'd take them all day just to get here. There were no miners at this location today, so we were all alone to do as we pleased as long as we didn't blow up mines with our shenanigans.
Eliser found a nice perch a little higher up from where we stood.
The shaft was just a bit further up the trail, but this spot flattened out nicely and viewed the valley. Also, it butted up against the smoothest cliffside we'd found so far. Or at least it used to be smooth. Giles had put a couple dents in the surface over the years. Okay, Giles started fixing his long hair back into a ponytail like mine. None of my other brothers understood what it was like to have long, unruly hair, but he did, and whenever they mocked me for it, he had my back. He opened up the bag of Dragon Vein and studied the red stones, deciding which one he wanted to pick for. Unceremoniously, I grabbed 2 random stones. One I tossed in the air for Eliser. She probably wasn't going to be blasting any holes with it, but she could use it to warm up her coal. Her chest glowed amber, like there was a fire building up inside her, which there was. It was up to her if she wanted to release it or swallow it. She purred, closing her eyes in utter bliss. I like to think the sensation she felt was comparable to drinking hot tea on a cold day for us. I eyed my stone, noticing how the gold and silver inside glistened in the summer. They were such beautiful rocks, but very unstable. Still, the crazy people of the East wore it for jewelry. It was the most expensive stone you could buy, because not only was this valley the only place to get it,
The designs and creations jewelers came up with to stop the stone from blowing up its wearer were intricate and expensive to make.
With a careless shrug, I threw it into the cliff wall.
The stone wasn't any bigger than my thumbnail, so the explosion only shook the mountain a little bit.
There was more smoke than fire, but man, it sure was satisfying to watch rock crumble.
Giles finally found a piece he liked. It was tiny, smaller than my pinky fingernail.
What was he going to do with that?
He came to my side, noticing my dubious stare, and held the stone out in his palm for me to look at.
This tiny guy is all a dragon prince needs to wield fire. If it's any bigger,
He can't crush it and use the fire within it. To us, it's absolutely useless, so I keep these aside and stash them for the princes. He placed the pebble into a small satchel, which looked like it contained quite a few of those pebble-sized stones.
will you give this to them when you visit?
Don't sit on it, and for the love of all the gods, don't drop it. By themselves, they're basically harmless in a bag like this. It'll blow a dragon up. Suddenly, I wasn't so sure about holding the bag. Very, very gently, I placed it in Elzer's saddlebag, who tried to move away from me after overhearing she'd blow up if she was too rough with it. I stared at my brother. I see you with that bag all the time. Is it always full of dragon bacon? Yeah, he responded so casually. I was worried for him. No one in their right mind could possibly be so calm about having something so unstable on their hip all day. In the same house as his family, there was a reason we had the satchel in the stable. Clearing my throat, I turned to the cliff face. Okay, so dragon princes only need a tiny bit of dragon vein, but how do they use it? How can a tiny spark turn into a flame they can fight with easily? With the magic inside them and the bond they share with their dragon fire, can't hurt them. They can crush the stone in their hand and let the magic in their blood flow free and grow the flame. With practice, they can will it into any shape like a sword. Prince Quentin preferred a bow and arrow, whatever works for them. Really, you make it sound easy. That's because it is. We haven't studied their magic, but they have all kinds of books to explain how to use their magic. All they have to do is wait until they become of age and go through the rite of passage with one of us and gain their magic so they can practice. It's safest here for them to practice it because our dragons can contain the flames if things get out of hand. So that's your secret. I demanded of him dubiously supervise them while they put theory to practice. Yeah. Well, I knew 3 jealous brothers who would like to get their hands on his throat for acting all cocky for having his prince catch onto fire wielding so quickly. Prince Quentin, as it turned out, was a natural with fire magic. Idiot. I saw. So why did we come up here if there is no secret? Laughing, Giles grabbed a handful of dragon vein and began tossing them one piece at a time into the wall. He laughed harder when I jumped behind him with a squeal and cursed him. The mountain shook with every explosion, flames bouncing off the walls and threatening to consume it. All the while, my idiot brother was laughing his ass off and having the time of his life. I didn't know if it was the way the boom felt in his bones or if it was my constant swearing and shouting at him that he loved more. Either way, I snatched the bag from him and jumped onto Ellis. If you want to be back home for dinner, I suggest you call your own dragon. I sneered at him, kicking him away when he tried to get on Ellisor behind me. I'll have no lunatic on my dragon. Very much agreeing with me, Ellisor took to the sky. The video is about to end, but the adventure has just begun. Don't go away, subscribe to our channel, and next time we'll fly even higher.